Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. I thought I'd just throw a quick presentation together for everybody, 20, 30 minutes, spend an hour preparing. That didn't go so well. I've spent probably 20 hours getting ready for this. I'm a perfectionist, so I expect my speech to be perfect, and my horse to be perfect, and my barn to be perfect, and okay, well that just went all to poop, so.
Oh, your horse is perfect.
Well, his little spot is falling out, and I'm like, oh, and he has a little spot of manure on the other side of his neck, but you know what, it's all in good fun. Okay, we're going to talk today on this list, so you guys can read down this list. It starts with the horse's mouth, the rider's ability, the horse's training. We're going to talk about direct contact bits, then leverage bits. We're going to go through a list of what makes a bit severe. We're going to talk about signal. I will define that for you. What makes signal fast and intense versus slow and soft. We're going to talk about why you choose fixed shanks or loose shanks. We're going to talk about bit balance, where to place the bit in the horse's mouth. If we have time, we're going to talk about different bit materials. That's the last one that can go. And then hopefully we'll have time for questions and answers. I'd like to be done in 45 minutes. That's my goal. So I got to talk fast. Okay. Okay. So we're going to talk about the horse's mouth, the rider's ability, and the horse's training. So this is my very willing participant, Cody. He has a very big mouth here. When we put a bit in a horse's mouth, we can affect the lips, right here, where the bit pulls on the lips. We can affect the bars, which is this interdental space where there's no teeth. We have like the gums. If you guys reach your hands in your horse's mouth, you can rub your fingers on their bars and you won't get bit. There's no teeth there. You have the horse's tongue. Obviously, you're going to have bits that apply pressure to the horse's tongue. And you're going to have the palate, which I want you guys to take your tongues and put your tongues on the roof of your mouth and just gently rub the roof of your mouth. Very, very sensitive. Okay, and we're also going to have teeth. Okay, so we should not have bits interfering with teeth. That is only going to happen if your bit is not placed right in your horse's mouth or your horse has wolf teeth. Okay, so if you don't know what wolf teeth are, check with your vet. Have your vet check your horse's mouth next time. Make sure there's no wolf teeth. Those can cause a lot of problems. When I'm giving lessons, I like to compare, we're on subject 2 now, I like to compare riding a horse with driving a car. Now, I've seen some of you drive, so this isn't always true, but when you're driving your car, you like to steer it to the left, steer it to the right, speed up, slow down. You don't go left and right, and I see so many people ride their horses like that, left and right, and stop, and they just move their hands so fast. They don't give their horse what I call think time. Okay, when you're riding your horse, you need to be aware of the fact that you have a piece of metal on your horse's mouth. If you had a piece of metal in your mouth, you would want that person riding you to be fair and give you time to respond to each cue that you were given. So when you're riding your horse, you want to move your hands nice and smooth and slow. Turn right, turn left. I think I was actually supposed to... Oh yes, now we're going to consider the horse's training. If our horse is not trained, if he doesn't know how to give to the bit, he is going to pull on any bit that you place in his mouth. Doesn't matter if it's severe or not. He's not going to understand what you're asking him to do. He's going to cause damage to his mouth. That's another thing I forgot to mention. When we're looking at our horse's mouth, we need to check their tongue. I knew a horse one time. She actually stepped in a piece of baler twine that had not been cut, and she got her tongue under that piece of baler twine. She must have just been eating, and then she jerked her head up. Well, she cut her tongue halfway off, and the person that had this horse didn't even know it until she opened the horse's mouth, and there's this tongue that's like, it's still attached, but it's like half broke off. So you need to look at your horse's mouths, make sure there's no damage, bars aren't cut up, tongue isn't cut up. If you do find a damaged spot, there's different bits you can use to avoid using those damaged areas on the horse's mouth. Okay, so our horses need to know how to give to the bit. For anybody who doesn't know what that is, we're going to use my very willing participant. been trained. It's a conditioned response, just like when I say to you, hey, what color is the grass?
Green.
Green. Boom. You know it's green. When I pull on this bit, my horse should know. Boom. Give. Okay, so I'll turn him a little bit so you can see a better view. Apply pressure to the bit. You'll notice that he comes with my pull. He doesn't pull against my pull. This is what giving is, coming with me. See how he tucks his nose in? And I was just gently touching him with my fingertips. Okay, I'm gonna grab with 2 fingers here to show you. See how he tucks his nose in? He knows to soften and to surrender to that pull. Same thing to the left and to the right. Oh, where's my ring? Here. Okay. Left. I'm touching with my fingers. Right. Okay, so he has been trained. It's a conditioned response. It's not even fair for you guys to stick a bit in your horse's mouth. If they don't know how to give, you can have Cody back. It's not even fair to expect a horse to tolerate or accept a bit in their mouth if they don't know what that bit means. We're going to focus on 2 types of bits today. First, we're going to focus on the snaffle bit, which is what I call a direct contact bit. With this bit's design, there's absolutely no leverage. You get a very clear signal to your horse. Right rein, 1 pound of pull on my rein equals 1 pound of pull on my horse's mouth. Nothing funny, distorted by leverage, very clear. 1 pound for 1 pound, direct contact bit. This is very good for beginning training when we're teaching our horses to give. I can show my horse exactly what I want. Clear pressure. So this is what I would choose in the very beginning. First bit, snaffle. The snaffle bit works by pinching the tongue. I'm not going to stick my tongue out for you guys. Any volunteers? I agree. Okay, so you put the bit in the horse's mouth. You pull on your reins. Can you see that pinching action? Pinches the horse's tongue. Now, if you pull harder, you're going to achieve pinch on the bars, which is the gums. If you pull too hard, palate pressure, roof of the mouth. So if you're pulling too hard, no, not good. Now, does anybody have a snaffle bit here with them that has a sleeve over the joint?
Your bit. On your plate.
Let me have that. So one handy thing about a snaffle bit that has this sleeve over the joint is it cannot collapse to the point where you get that palate pressure. That's as far as it goes. Versus this one, collapses all the way. Thank you very much. When we are choosing a snaffle bit, there's one really cool thing about snaffle bits that when I found out, I was like, oh, you gotta be kidding me. Okay? There's so many bit makers that either don't care or don't know. When you make a snaffle bit, oh, and I didn't bring one that was made incorrectly. Maybe somebody has one here. When you hold your snaffle bit, Leslie knows what I'm talking about, by the joint, the center joint, you see the butt of this bit, these 2 end pieces here, meet evenly. This bit maker made this bit with one side of the mouthpiece longer than the other. That takes more work, that costs more. Now, the difference is, do we have one that's not made correctly? Do we have one that doesn't meet evenly here? Thank you, volunteers. Okay, so bit number 2, I don't know if you guys can see the difference where the butts of that mouthpiece meet. One is higher and one is lower on the one that's not made correctly. What this does on this bit that's not made correctly, you're going to have more control over the longer side. You're going to have a horse that turns better. I actually trained for years like that. I'm like, man, this horse is turning so well this way. What's wrong? And I'd work on that bad way, and then I realized my bit wasn't made correctly. Okay, so check that on your snaffles. Scratch the ones that aren't made correctly. We also need to check our snaffle bits, all our bits actually. Make sure there's nothing that's uncomfortable. No rough spots, no sharp edges. You want to make sure that that bit would be comfortable in your mouth. So think about that. Nice, smooth, and also pinch points too. If there's an area, does somebody have a snaffle bit here that's maybe like mine, but doesn't have the wider sleeve on the side of it? Man, that one might not be as good. I'm going to need this later. Remember, I have this one. Okay, I'm looking for a bar on the side, but not, where the mouthpiece joins right in. That will work. Okay, so this isn't a snaffle, but this is kind of a similar design. So Sam's and Leslie's bits. I really like these wide sides, like these sleeves on the sides of my bit, because it avoids having like a pinch point here. This isn't exactly snaffle, but you can see how there's wiggle in that joint. You can grab lips in that little wiggle spot. And if you're trying to train your horse and lips are being caught, this was, I'm going to save your seat. Thank you. Okay, we are on to leverage bits. A leverage bit presents a much more complex signal. Goodbye list. You guys didn't know I'm an artist too. I used to draw horses as a kid all the time. Let me go over the parts of the bit real quick. Okay, this is the cheek piece, the whole cheek on the bit. The purchase is from the mouthpiece up, that part of the cheek piece. The shank is from the mouthpiece down. This would be considered the butt of the bit, where the mouthpiece meets the shank. This is the mouthpiece, anything that goes in the mouth. You have your rein attachment, and your headstall and curb attachment would be here. I think I'm done with him. He's getting a little impatient. Okay? So with leverage bits, we have leverage. Okay, so depending on the bit's design, when I apply pressure to a rein on a leverage bit, the horse may feel 3 pounds of pull for my 1 pound of pull because of the leverage action of this bit. And depending on the mouthpiece on the bit, we can have tongue pressure, bar pressure, lip pressure, palate pressure. This one also adds pull pressure. It's going to be subtle, but you see how when the shanks are pulled, it pulls a little bit on that headstall. We're going to have a little bit of pull pressure, and voila, now we have curb pressure. Okay? So this bit puts the horse's mouth in a vise. Hey, do we have a bridle that's not disassembled that's a leverage bit? Yeah, Mary, come here. You might volunteer, please. Come here. All right.
I want you to rub that afterwards, because I'm afraid it's going to come up.
Oh, I constantly have to work my bit like this. I need you. Oh. Did you put makeup on this morning?
A little.
Okay, hold those reins. I'm going to be the horse, all right? So here is the horse's chin, here's the horse's tongue. Oh, maybe I don't need you. This is pretty good. Okay? So watch what happens when I pull on these reins. Did you see my thumb go up? That's the chin getting squished, and the tongue is getting squished. Well, and your bars. Okay? So that's how a leverage bit works. You're not going to have that leverage action on a direct contact bit. Sorry there. Span the crowd. Okay, depending on what type of mouthpiece your leverage bit has, your port can provide tongue relief. It can provide lots of tongue relief. So you guys look at your horse's mouths. If you're looking at a bit that has tongue relief, you want to consider the size of your horse's tongue. The vet was out here this spring. He's like, oh my gosh, that horse has the biggest tongue I've ever seen. It's like, oh, really? So, look at your horse's mouths. If you want that tongue relief, a standard bit may not be the same if your horse has a really fat tongue. Okay? So the wider the mouthpiece, the wider the port, the more tongue relief you're going to have. Now, when you start talking about ports, you start talking about palate pressure if they get 2.5 inches tall or higher. Remember what we said about the palate? I'm going to tell you guys, save that for experienced riders, well-trained horses, you can use that pallet to do really cool things, but you don't want to be damaging that when you're not intending on it. So 2.5 inches or shorter port for the leverage bits. Leverage bits like this, when they have a port, you see how this one has a port in the middle, it's kind of smooth on the sides. We now have lots of bar pressure. You see how that would be on the horse's gums? So we like to save the bars for after the horse knows how to give to the bit. That's more of what you would use on a trained horse. So bar pressure mostly on this one with tongue relief. All right, guys, the design and placement of the shanks on a bit impacts the severity a lot. I have a drawing. I think we'll go over this real quick before I flip the page so we don't have to come back. Okay, so the design of the shanks. We have ratio, which is a huge impact on severity. So 1 for the purchase to the butt of the bit compared to 1, 2, 3 on your shanks. That is much more severe because it's a higher ratio. Okay? The more your shank comes behind this vertical center line, you can see from the drawing as the shank moves further and further back, you have less leverage the further back it goes. Okay, so the greater the ratio, the more leverage. And the quicker the signal. We'll talk about signal in a second. Now you know what I've been doing all week. Can you see, Margie?
Now here.
If I stand over here, I have this so memorized. This is shank design. Whatever path your shank takes to get from the mouthpiece to the point of pull, which here, this poster, you guys probably can't read this. This is the point of pull from your vertical line. So if you hold the upper part of your bit on a vertical line, when you draw a line straight down through your bit, depending on where your point of pull, which would be where your rein attaches, is going to decide the severity of the bit, the leverage, the signal, all of that. So the further behind the vertical line the point of pull is, the less severe the bit. The more weight we put in a shank, which I don't know if anybody has a Las Cruces, I think that's how you pronounce it, bit. Does anybody have a bit in here that has like bling on the shank or a bunch of weight? Probably not. I've never even used one in my life. But the more material you put in a bit, well, here's one, for instance. This isn't very much more material, but you can see the difference in these two shanks. Hold still. You see how one is straight and one has a small S curve to it? Okay, anybody who hasn't been here, there's coffee and hot chocolate around the corner. So make yourselves at home. Go get some. Okay, so the more material that you put in a bit, you guys have probably wondered, why would you put an S? Is it pretty? No, it's because you add more weight to the shank. You can get bigger S's, you can get thicker stock, you can make this heavier, and that intensifies the signal to the horse. That's the only reason that you're going to need added weight to that. All right, guys, I'm going to give you a list of what would make a bit severe versus mild. Got your pens and papers out? Here we go. Biggest thing I see that will make a bit severe is you. Okay? There is no bit. Okay, look at this bit. Watch it. Is it hurting? Can't hurt me. This bit cannot hurt a horse's mouth. It's not possible. You attached to this bit can hurt your horse's mouth. So my biggest thing is you. Your hands can hurt a horse's mouth. So let's assess our abilities when we pick a bit. Look at yourself. Say, hey, do I give my horse that think time when we turn? Do I drive my car nice and carefully? But if you're one of those crazy drivers that's whipping around, you need to pick a bit that is suitable to your ability. Okay, so a person that, maybe is a beginner and doesn't know how to move their hands slow and goes from right to left really fast, pick a bit that has very little leverage and a slow signal. That'll give that horse more think time. But if you're one of those quiet, meek riders that wants to cue your horse and not be seen by the judge, maybe you should pick a bit that has a quicker signal and more leverage. Another thing that makes a bit severe is your horse's training. You saw how Cody just kind of quietly gave to that bit. There was no argument to it. If I put a severe bit in his mouth, he's going to quietly give to it. He's not going to fight it and damage his tongue. Now, if I put a 2-year-old in that severe bit, that 2-year-old's going to fight that bit and they're going to damage their tongue. So looking at your horse's level of training, again, is very important when you're selecting that bit. Match it to your horse's training and to your ability. Does anybody have just a plain old-fashioned curb bit? Like the one everybody buys for their first horse? Beautiful. Ooh. Does anybody have one of these that has a little bit more port to it? A little bit more. I'll take both of these. Look at this actually. A second. Okay, so for tongue relief, the more tongue relief you have, the less severe. You see how the top bit has a little bump on it? That's your port. That's tongue relief. So the more your horse can get their tongue up out of that pressure, they can now swallow, they can move their tongue around. Happier horse, less severe, more severe. I'm going to get these back from you, but for now. Shanks. We're going to go back here to this one. Your shank is going to decide how severe your bit is, okay? So the straighter your shank is with your vertical line, remember we're going to draw a line straight down here through the purchase and the butt of the mouthpiece, and you watch where your shank falls behind that vertical line. The closer your shank is to that vertical line, the more leverage you have, more severe. In contrast to a bit that has the shank that falls behind that vertical line, see how this one goes way back? Can you see that, Margie? Way back. That shank has very little severity to the leverage. I mean, there's like nothing there. So you see a big curve in the shank, less severe. Straight shank, more severe. The longer your shank is, we're going to go back to this one, ratio, I think. Remember how we talked about the ratios again? The longer the shank is in comparison to the purchase, the more severe and the quicker the signal you're going to get. Does anybody have a correctional bit? I have one, I just couldn't find it last night. A correctional bit is going to be, it's going to have a port, but it's going to have like joints to the port. Do you guys know what I'm talking about since we don't have one? Okay, so the mouthpiece on the bit is going to decide the severity too. You may have a port bit, but depending on how that bit is made is going to decide how severe it is. When you start to smooth the port out, that's very nice on the horse's mouth. But when you start to make straight angles, maybe I drew one on here. I might have. No, I didn't. Aw, bummer. Okay, so you start getting joints on those ports. Those joints dig into the sides of the horse's tongue. That starts getting severe. That's why they call that bit a correctional bit. Naughty, naughty. Your curb strap is also a consideration when we're talking about severity. The wider the material of your curb strap, I'm sure you guys have seen single chain curb straps and double chain curb straps. The wider it is, the more that pressure is spread out, so that makes it more mild. The narrower the material in the curb straps, the more that pressure is intensified, so that makes it more severe. Now we're going to talk about signal. different bits give the horse different amounts of time to respond to what you're asking them to do. I like to compare this to driving your car again, and you come up to a traffic light, okay? We're pretty lucky. We get a green light, and then a yellow light, and then a red light. We get, adequate time to stop. There's lots of, oh no, wait, I'm losing my train of thought. Just imagine if you had a green light, boom, a red light. We'd have lots of brake smashing and accidents happening. That's like very little signal, a quick signal, sorry. Okay, so the green light, yellow light, red light, that's a pretty quick signal, but you still have time to stop. But let's imagine we have an extra light, let's just say a white light, okay? So we're driving up to the traffic light, green, white. We're like, oh, we better get ready to stop. Yellow, oh, we really better get ready to stop. Red, okay, we're stopped. We had plenty of time to stop. Although some of you might say, speed up. Okay, so that's what signal is in a bit. Signal either gives the horse, boom, stop now, signal, or signal gives the horse, get ready, get set, stop. So it tells the horse either quickly or slowly to stop. We're going to, yes, where are we? Okay, a list of what makes the bit's signal faster or more intense. Now we're going to get to this one in a little bit. I didn't quite organize this as I should, because an underbalanced bit is going to make the horse's signal quick. It's going to be like, boom, stop, underbalanced bit. Okay, the greater the ratio of the purchase to the shanks, the quicker the signal. The tighter your curb strap is, if you crank that baby up tight, when you pull, that horse feels it right now. Fast signal. The heavier your shank is, or the more material in your shank, the more intense the feeling of that signal to your horse's mouth. You probably wouldn't see this one in a traditional learning about bits and signals one, but I have to add this one in. For years, I've hated riding in loose or light reins. Man, and I couldn't figure out why do I hate riding in light reins. And then it just connected with me. Yesterday, I was talking about this to myself. I'm like, oh, the more weight in your reins, the more you can pick up on your rein and talk to your horse before you actually get to that point where you're pulling on the horse. So if you have little floppy, loose, light reins, when you pull on them, you're pulling on them now. As soon as that pressure is taken out of that rein, you're pulling on your horse's mouth. A heavier rein, you can kind of start to talk to your horse before you ever get to that point. Now we're moving on to the pros and cons of fixed versus loose shanks. If you're a novice rider and you can't keep your reins even, somebody with a fixed shank bit, I need one. The shanks don't move on a fixed shank one. See how my shanks are loose? Somebody just gave me one. I think it was you. Okay, perfect. Okay, so the fixed shank bit, when you pull on one rein, okay, watch what happens to the other side. You pull on two reins. Okay, this is like the bit for dummies. That's why everybody goes and buys one for their first horse. Okay, so you don't know how to keep your reins the same on both sides? A fixed shank bit takes care of that for you. Yay! However, when you go to a fixed shank bit, you lose the ability to work just one side of the horse. So you'll see a lot of these bits in my training cabinet. Okay, because I do a lot of training, I want to talk to one side of the horse. I want to lift one shoulder on my horse. Okay, so a horse that does not know how to lift its shoulders, okay, not good. Not good for training on that. A horse that doesn't know how to bend right and left, not good for that. Now, hopefully you've covered that in your basic training. You shouldn't really be doing that when you get into a shanked bit, but you always have to remind your horse. So you'll find me riding in a loose shanked bit to bend to my horse right, bend to my horse left, lift the left shoulder, lift the right shoulder. So these are great, 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 great for training. but we have not vacuumed this one yet. Also, the more joints you guys have in your mouthpieces, the more movement you have in your mouthpieces, and sometimes there's rollers on mouthpieces, little copper spinny things. The more the horse has to move in its mouth, the more he's going to salivate, he's going to loosen his jaw, and that creates a relaxed horse that you can bend around and teach to give. So that's really nice for the greener horses. I keep getting this screwed up. Really nice for those green horses that you want them to just relax and accept that training. All right, here we are onto the more complicated factor. Thank you guys for letting me do this because I learned a lot preparing for this. Like, oh, I actually asked my husband one night because he was going to school for mechanical engineering technology. Like, Adam, why would the weight of a shank make the signal more intense? I don't get it. One shank that has the same design as another shank. What's the difference? He said, well, think of it like swinging a foam hammer compared to swinging a sledgehammer. They're both the same size, but one has more impact, more weight to that swing. That's going to be a more intense signal. I'm like, oh, I love you. You're so smart. So he really knows a lot about horses without even knowing it. Okay. Grab your shanked bits, guys. Put them on your fingers. Depending where your shanks hang, and we're comparing this to a vertical line, all right? Vertical line. If your shanks are forward of that vertical line, overbalanced bit. If your shanks hang straight with the vertical line, balanced bit. If your shanks swing behind the vertical line, which I would doubt anybody's does, underbalanced bit. Okay? Overbalanced, balanced, underbalanced. Overbalanced is really great for training because if your shank automatically wants to swing forward, what happens to your curb strap when your shank swings forward? It releases. Yep. Your shank swings forward. See how this curb strap attachment drops? It releases. So when you're training and you want that quick release, oh, good job, you did the right thing. Let go of your reins. Shank swings forward. You have a very quick release on a overbalanced bit. So if you're training and you want that boom now release, overbalanced. Great. Now if you have a fancy Western pleasure horse, you want him to travel around that ring and keep his face vertical, balanced bit. The balanced bit will only relieve the pressure, it's like a sweet spot, only when that horse brings his face right to vertical. Okay, so you wouldn't want to necessarily train in a balanced bit, but a finished horse, if you're showing it, balanced is great. Now, underbalanced. What happens to the curb strap on an underbalanced bit? It doesn't release. So that's seldom desirable. The balance of an underbalanced bit causes there to be a really, really quick signal to the horse. Boom, you're there, pulling on him, pulling on him. No release of that curb strap. Okay, so you probably aren't going to see too many underbalanced bits, but isn't that cool? Like, wow, now I know. When we are considering how to place the bit in our horse's mouth, I like to look at my horse's training first, okay? 2-year-old, jumping on the bit, chewing away, biting at it. He's like, this is really sucky, get this thing out of my mouth. He's going to try to get his tongue over that bit. So we want to avoid that at all costs. When I have a 2-year-old that's just first bitted up, crank it up. 2 wrinkles. Don't get your tongue over that bit. If the horse gets his tongue over the bit, causes a relief of endorphins, and that can be very addictive for the horse. Once you train a horse to get his tongue over the bit, they're going to keep trying to get their tongue over the bit. So avoid that. If you have a 2-year-old, get that bit up tight. Don't let them get their tongue over the bit until they settle down, quiet down. Then you can loosen the bit up in their mouth. My favorite spot to have a bit in a horse's mouth is just touching the corners of the lips. Okay, so imagine this. Come on, guys, put your fingers in your mouth. So I'm kidding. Imagine this. You have a bit in your mouth. Wow, that hurts. Wow. Maybe not so hard. Okay, so you have a bit in your mouth. If it's pulling, if you have 2 wrinkles, you have pressure, okay? But if you have a bit in your mouth and there's no wrinkles, and the bit is just quietly touching the corner of the mouth, if you were putting your fingers in your mouth like I am, you could feel how if you're just gently touching, any pressure is felt. So if you're wanting to achieve maximum feel on your horse's mouth, loosen that bit up. Just let the bit touch the corners of the mouth. Then when you pull on that rein, your horse is going to feel the lightest cues. What time is it?
You've been going for 36 minutes.
Perfect. We have time for materials. Okay, materials on a bit. This one has some copper inlays in its sweet iron. This one, same thing, copper inlays, sweet iron. That's all I have. Sam, this is your bit, right? This one looks like it might be stainless steel. Many, many different bit materials available today. Okay, so horses don't really like the taste of stainless steel. Excuse me. Horses like the taste of sweet iron. It rusts a little bit. You can kind of see the mouthpiece is a little bit brown. That's very palatable. They like the taste of that. Copper, they really like. That really makes them salivate. But one of the downsides of copper is it's really soft. So you put a copper bit in a horse's mouth. Did anybody bring a copper bit? Copper can be chewed on and create sharp edges very quickly. So I'm not sure how many people are actually making copper bits anymore. I haven't seen one in the store in a while. But what you can do is you can mix copper with a harder metal, create an alloy, and have a copper bit that's not going to get marred up by horse chewing on it or whatever. So that's really good. However, because of the cost of copper, most people are going towards like the sweet iron with a copper inlay. It doesn't cost as much, which I like when you have a bunch of bits. So stainless steel, aluminum, not so tasty. Your horse isn't going to relax his jaw, move around, relax, let you train him. Sweet iron, copper, those are great. There's a whole bunch of more bit materials, but I want to give you guys some time to ask questions, so shoot. Oh, ah. Questions. Anybody questions? What?
What are those slobber straps that people hook up to their reins?
Now, are you talking about where you would actually attach the shanks down here? That, okay, that will decrease the movement. If you have a bit that's really loose, that will decrease the wobble in the bit and just stabilize it. That also gives it somewhat of like a fixed shank signal, because you can kind of pull on the left rein and now you're pulling on the right rein too.
Why is it that you see people that ride Tennessee Walkers have such long shanks?
Nobody here has Tennessee Walkers, right? No. You know, the reason that I hosted this was...
Have you noticed it?
Yes, there's a Tennessee Walker horse bit, and it has a curve to the shank and a long shank. It's very severe. The reason I hosted this was because I think that most people don't have a clue what their bit does. They go to the store and they go, oh, that one's pretty. Oh, look at the beads on the side of this one. Isn't that pretty? Oh, we get some silver on it. Wow. This one, okay, so if you don't know why you have a bit in your horse's mouth, you can't choose according to your ability and your horse's training. I don't think most of those horses should be in those bits. They pull on the bit as they go. So, good question.
I gotta believe that the horse is not trained.
That's correct.
Yeah. Untrained horse.
It's not relaxed, the head's up, they're hollowed out, and in pain. It's sad. It's real bad. So when you see people out and think they're really gating around and, oh, look at me and this, that horse, a mess.
I should repeat his question just for the tape. He asked, why do the gaited horses tend to have such long shanks when they ride?
Because that's what they think that they have to ride.
Right, because it's a gaited horse bit. Yeah. Mary.
If you have a horse that's half gated, we used to rack or have a gate, how, if you wanted to, and he hasn't done it in years, Is there any way to cue them into that, or?
Okay, so Mary asked if you had a bit or a horse that used to gait, which Cody, that Palomino, I had to train him not to gait. He's a quarter horse. He gaited. I trained him not to gait. Is there something you could do to teach that horse to gait again?
If you wanted to.
If you
yeah.
wanted to. If you used to gait, yes, teach him to collect. Step up from behind, walk him until he waddles a little bit faster and a little bit faster. As soon as he breaks into that trot, pull him back down to the walk. Walk, 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 break, pull back down to the walk. Walk, 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 break, pull him back down to the walk. You only let them walk, and then they walk faster and faster and faster and faster. Voila, they're gaiting. Somebody else.
What are your views about like twisted bits and harsher bits or like contesting?
Good question. I kind of overlooked a lot of areas of this because I know Saturdays are precious for everybody, family time. She asked, what's the difference between a twisted bit and just a plain old mouthpiece? The more twists you get into a bit, or I shouldn't say it that way, once you twist the material, it's no longer smooth, and that creates edges on the mouthpiece, and that becomes more severe. Intensified pressure on each little point versus that pressure smoothed out over the mouthpiece. So twisted, if your horse is pulling on it, is going to make your pull more intense, stronger, which I always encourage people, hey, just train your horse, but that takes time.